Hello everyone, my name is Gabby, and yes, you read that title right. For the first time, for longer than like 2 minutes, I am actually going to be talking about Pokemon. Despite my username being Mozilla Vulpix, I basically never talk about Pokemon in this channel, and that's basically just because I can't really think of video topics, but I have a video topic because there's something about Pokemon I just really have been really enjoying. That is Pokemon Sun and Moon. I beat the main story about like a few weeks ago now. I'm basically making my way through the side quest content. I've done the Ultra Beast side quest and stuff like that. So I feel like I've done most of the really important post-game stuff, and I feel like I've kind of gotten the gist of the story at this point. And I just need to say, like, first of all, Pokemon Sun and Moon were really good games. Like, they were just really enjoyable to play from start to finish. But for me, like, maybe because I'm a bit of a strange Pokemon fan, that I'm honestly really interested in the story of a Pokemon game. And Pokemon Sun and Moon story, well, you may say some things were a bit rushed and some things were a bit kind of strange and maybe some things needed a bit more personality to them. Like, the fact is, it was a really interesting story. Like, for the first time since Pokemon Black and White, I'd say, Pokemon Sun and Moon story actually made me think more about like the Pokemon world and like the wider meaning and everything like that. Like it actually made me think, and there was some really interesting moments in the story, and there's one moment in particular that I think was just making me think about Pokemon so much, and I just want to share what it was and why I really enjoyed it. Obviously there will be spoilers for Pokemon Sun and Moon here, so if you haven't played the games, you should play the games. If you guys are like playing Dragon Ball Fusions instead, just play Pokemon Sun and Moon and then you can know what I'm actually talking about. And if you haven't played Pokemon Sun and Moon, like, play it soon, and then once you finish the game, come back to this video because I'm just really excited. So the most interesting part of Pokemon Sun and Moon's story, to me, was the entire section in Po Town. For those of you who don't know and don't care about spoilers, Po Town was essentially like Team Skull, which is one of the big villainous teams of the game. It was Team Skull's big like hideout and headquarters. At one point in the story, basically just as the story starts like actually picking up, a bunch of little kids who are sort of related to Acerola, I don't know how you pronounce her name, the ghost type trial leader, their Pokemon get stolen by Team Skull, and they say that you need to go to Po Town, which is Team Skull's headquarters, to get the Pokemon back. So you basically go in and like infiltrate their headquarters, beat up everyone, and then get these Pokemon back. Obviously, this is not a really like new thing. In fact, Pokemon games do this a lot. Stuff like, say, Silph Co, or other things where you go and infiltrate like Team Magma's headquarters, Team Aqua's headquarters, Team Galactic's headquarters, and of course Team Plasma and Team Flare. But the way they did it with Po Town was honestly, they handled it in a completely different direction that you would ever expect. In every other game, it's like you are like this triumphant hero. You're going in to the villain's headquarters, you're gonna kick ass, you're gonna just be like, these guys are all coming at you, but you're like, oh, you can't stop me, I'm just such a good Pokemon trainer, I can beat all of you guys really quickly, and then it's like, the villains are gonna get increasingly desperate and putting like all like their top grunts in, and all of like their admins, and you just beat them all and stuff like that. But yeah, Po Town, completely different and completely different tone. The tone was really serious. And what I mean by that is that, see, in every other team headquarters, generally, it's fortified, and they have all the grunts there, and they're all it feels like this big, massive corporation, and when you look at it, it's like intimidating. You're like, oh, how can I possibly deal with all of these guys on my own? Well, it's going to be such a big deal. And it's like clearly they're prepared and everything. Whereas in Po Town, well, Po Town is basically a city or a little village or something that Team Skull kind of took over. And they could have made that really threatening sounding. But when you enter Po Town itself, just the moment you start hearing the music, it's actually kind of somber and depressing. Team Skull are not incredibly organized or really that threatening. It feels like they're just a bunch of guys sitting out in the rain just sort of waiting for you to come and beat them, but it's like, you actually kind of almost feel sorry for them. Po Town is not this incredibly beautiful building with all of these secret staircases and teleporting pads. It's just a town where Team Skull have basically been crashing in. There's graffiti everywhere, it's raining hard, there is like a Pokemon Center where the Team Skull grunts just kind of crashing there, and just like they kind of charge you a bit of money to heal the Pokemon. It's like they just take a Pokemon Center and try to kind of re-outfit it for their own purposes. It really feels like they don't know what they're doing, or like they're just kind of lost and confused, and they don't have many resources, and they don't they're not really up for being bad guys or being villains. They're just kind of lost and scared and confused. When you go into like the big main building where a lot of the Team Skull grunts are, like the building's all just dilapidated, there's furniture everywhere. There are Team Skull grunts who are just lying there on the floor, not even attempting to fight you, which in itself is actually kind of creepy because you can't even really talk to them. They're just like lying down, not doing anything, not attempting to fight. It is a very different kind of tone that you'd expect to see from the normal storming the villain headquarters. And it does make you think and make you understand a lot about Team Skull. See, the one thing that NPCs have been telling you and sort of the story itself have been telling you is that the one thing that makes Team Skull different is that you actually kind of find out what Team Skull is, and that is that Team Skull is essentially made up of a lot of characters and Pokemon trainers who have failed their island challenge. Basically, failed Pokemon challenges. That's definitely what they say Guzma is like. I don't know about everyone else in Team Skull, but that seems to be like that's what they're kind of made up on. Team Skull is made up of actual failed Pokemon trainers. That in itself is something that the series has never really covered before in like a main series game. And it really made me think about like what it is like to be a person in this Pokemon game, in a Pokemon world, and especially as opposed to being the protagonist. Because the thing is, if you're a protagonist in a video game, obviously you are basically automatically like the chosen one. You are going to beat the game. And in this case, in Pokemon games, you are already basically predestined to be the champion because you're the protagonist of the game. As long as you keep playing the game and you don't lose or you don't give up at some point, you will be the champion. Because that's how the game works. That's how games work. You are set up to succeed. The game is designed so that you can always succeed. But one thing that makes Pokemon different from a lot of other games is like the gameplay is sort of like totally symmetrical between player characters and non-player characters. You fight other Pokemon trainers, and the other Pokemon trainers, unlike say villains in other villains like a video game, like other sort of like generic enemies, they have the exact same capabilities as you. They can do the exact same things that you do. They have the same Pokemon limits, the same kind of Pokemon they can use, the same kind of moves that they can use. The only thing, at least in Sun and Moon and X and Y, that the player protagonist has that makes them special is in X and Y they can use Mega Evolutions, and in Sun and Moon they can use Z moves, but the fact is also there are trainers later on in the story that also use Z moves. Basically, one thing that makes Pokemon a unique game is that there is nothing that inherently makes the player character better at Pokemon fighting than any other character. It's just that the protagonist is being controlled by you, the player character, and you, the player character, kind of know the type chart a bit better and know strategies and also have the ability to save and reset and stuff like that. So because of that, it basically means that every trainer that you fight in a Pokemon game, every non-player character who has a Pokemon that you can fight, they all essentially have the capability to become the champion. There is nothing saying that they can't go on their own Pokemon adventure because they have Pokemon, they can still continue on the story. They could technically become the champion in their own way. The only thing that's stopping a random non-player character from becoming the champion is the fact that, well, you're the main character, you are the player, so that means you're going to be the champion. And because of that, of course, it essentially means that, every non-player character you ever meet are basically completely useless. Unless it's like a very significant named and uniquely designed character, and then the warning flags go off and you're like, okay, this person is totally going to be the champion, but besides that, like a random trainer that you fight while you're going on one route and you have to fight them because otherwise you don't want to go through this whole grass, so you're going to fight the trainer, they could be the champion. They could be a really good Pokemon trainer if it wasn't for you. Obviously, this is something I never really thought about before because the Pokemon games never really went into the implications as to what happens if when you're 10 years old, you get your first Pokemon, you go out on a Pokemon journey like everyone else who becomes 10 years old and become a Pokemon journey, and you actually fail. Like, you just suck at Pokemon battling and you don't go around and beat all the gyms, or in this case, go to all the islands and win your island challenge. If this entire world is built around Pokemon and you're just not good at battling with Pokemon, if you fail your island challenge or you fail the gym leader challenges, it would kind of make you depressed. It would make you feel like the entire purpose of the world has no meaning because everything is revolving around something that you're not even very good at. It'd make you really struggle to find a purpose in life. And that's exactly the kind of person who would be roped into a life of crime. That's exactly what Team Skull is. A bunch of Pokemon trainers who aren't very good at being Pokemon trainers and don't have any purpose in life, so they sit around and kind of join this gang to sort of kind of become like-minded individuals and then go around and go to a life of crime and start stealing Pokemon and also get roped into the Ether Foundation because reasons. Basically, Team Skull doesn't feel like a bunch of random maniacal cackling villain organizations that just exist because they exist. Team Skull feels like a legitimate criminal organization. They feel like real criminals in that they don't just come because they're inherently evil. They come because they are being mistreated by society, or at least they feel like they're being mistreated by society. They feel like society has no place for them, they're not good enough, so they're going to kind of go around and just, screw the rules, try and do their own thing, do the kind of thing that society doesn't want them to do. That is so interesting. That is so much more realistic. That is just such an interesting idea to Pokemon. It adds so much more to this world of Pokemon. Pokemon has been going on for 20 years, and I never really thought it was going to explore kind of implications like this. Because it's never really felt like a complete world, because everything that could imply that maybe the Pokemon world isn't this incredibly amazing fantasy where everything is perfect, everything like that is kind of just being brushed around over the fence. Stuff like, do they have Pokemon wars? Do they have do people always agree? Do they use Pokemon for terror? And it's whenever Pokemon normally covered this, it was mostly just very, black and white, okay, yeah, there's bad stuff, but it's only because they're evil organizations, because they're evil, and those evil people can easily be beaten by 10-year-olds, so don't worry about it. But no, here it actually feels a bit more subtle. A lot of Pokemon Sun and Moon story seems to kind of really go into the implications of these characters who kind of slip by the cracks, the characters who society kind of forgets about, and where Pokemon doesn't necessarily make their world charmed and full of meaning. Obviously we have Team Skull, but there's also Lillie and also Gladion. In Pokemon games, we always take for granted the fact that obviously we have these amazing supportive single mothers who always be okay, now go on a Pokemon adventure, and they're always there to go and heal their Pokemon and ask how they're doing, and everything's always really nice and charmed and beautiful. But then it's what if you're like Lillie and Gladion, and your father has disappeared, and you have a crazy mother who is basically kind of gone insane because she's being possessed by an Ultra Beast? Did you ever really think about that? Where you don't have a parental figure who is actually supportive, to the point you run away from home, and running away from home is actually a terrifying business. Gladion has to be forced to work with Team Skull to get more money so he can survive and have a place to stay. And his clothes are getting ripped, and he's it feels like he's living really harshly on his own. It doesn't feel like it's a very nice thing. Whereas Lillie is basically forced to flee for her life, and she kind of has to seek refuge with other people, and they kind of become her own parental figure, and it's it's nice, seeing Lillie have a really nice relationship with Professor Kukui and Professor Burnett and all these other, all the kahunas and stuff, but it never really completely went away, the fact that Lillie is basically almost an orphan. She's run away from home, and these other people are looking after her, but she doesn't really have one place she can call her own. She's just kind of coming with us. And it's kind of depressing if you think about it. Really adult implications. Stuff you wouldn't expect Pokemon to ever try to make you think about. Obviously, this is still a Pokemon game, and they don't seem to want to go too far in the whole, actually the Pokemon world isn't actually the best place ever kind of thing. Mostly just because, one, you have characters like Hau, where no matter what terrible things are going on, he can always manage to put on a brave face and also really believe that everyone can be friends and we can go around and go and have masaladas sometimes. Seriously, I didn't really like Hau initially. I thought he was a bit bland, but I feel like Hau was really important in a story like this, where everything starts getting surprisingly dark when things get real, and he's the only one who's always the complete idealist and optimist. And also the fact is, once you get to the end of the game, everything does get better. Like, Lusamine gets better. Guzma kind of sort of learns the error of his ways. Team Skull starts kind of getting integrated. They're having people coming into society and kind of helping them, helping these people on the fringes of society kind of integrate again and giving them a purpose in life. Like, everything does get really optimistic once you get to the post game, which is probably why I love the post game so much. It just feels like you get this really like the kind of culmination of everything that you've been working so hard to achieve. Like, the Pokemon universe starts as surprisingly kind of dark and you could get almost cynical about it, but in the end everyone like finds a purpose in life and everything is fine, and the only thing that's kind of uncertain is like if Lusamine is going to get better, but of course that's something I really hope we do get explored in other games, like if we're getting another maybe a Sun and Moon sequel, or like even if we go straight to Gen 8, it would be really great to see Lillie and see how Lillie is going. I miss her like everyone else. She was great. I feel like I could keep talking about Pokemon Sun and Moon story for like another hour if I really, really wanted to. But that was like the really big stuff in Pokemon Sun and Moon story that really interested me. Just the simple idea that just because you have a Pokemon doesn't mean that the entire world, you know exactly what you're going to do for the rest of your life, and that your life is going to be charmed forever, because Pokemon are just so amazing, guys. Just the idea that there was another option, another way you could go. I think that was just the most interesting part of Pokemon Sun and Moon story to me. So for those of you who've played Pokemon Sun and Moon, what did you guys initially think about the Po-Town section? And about the Ether Foundation, and about Lusamine, and about Lillie, and about Hal, and the Ultra Beasts, and everything? Like, did you guys have the same kind of conclusions that I did? Because honestly, this is just something I was just really thinking about it, and I just really, really enjoyed it so much. Pokemon Sun and Moon story was just so interesting to me, and I love what they did with it. I love what they did with Aloha, and it was just such a great experience. And I really hope that the next Pokemon game actually uses some of these ideas and tries to do something more with the Pokemon world. It really brought up this urge for them to do more with Pokemon that I haven't really felt for ages. Probably because generally they didn't do more, so I never expected anything more, but now they're doing more, and now it's like the next Pokemon game has a lot to live up to. And I hope it can live up to that. I really hope it will.